It's been 6 months. It's exactly 6 months today. 6 long months since you've rendered me alone. Unwanted, purposeless. I'm writing this to you so you could finally have just a little understanding of how your absence has affected me. Never before you really seemed to get it, let alone care. Now you just might finally know. Now you might just finally have the slightest idea of what you've done and what you've brought upon yourself. Jesus, I still remember that day, though as it just happened. There was really no warning signs for this. It was just night at the feed here. Well, it was for you and your friends, so you say, but not for me. That's what never occurred to me. Why would you go out with them in the same someplace, but exclude me? God forbid I wanted to tag along too. I was your boyfriend after all. It's not like we could have spent a little less time together or anything. Yeah, we saw each other a few days out of the week, but we could have done a lot better. It was obvious to me that it was the feeder down the plaza. After all, it was the one we'd go, and it was really the only one in town anyway. On my way there, my eyes searched for that possibility of seeing the golden 2008 Mazda you drove. I may have seen it a couple times on the turns, but it's not certain to me though. I didn't see where you parked, but I'm pretty sure it was you I saw through the parking lot, walking into the cinema with a few other girls. They were free to be specific. I had what would happen all planned out. Walk into the movies inconspicuously. It was within my planning to find you among the small crowd of people. Throughout, yes, it would have been a bit of a shock to you and your friends to me, for suddenly ask a word with you. It was at the point you sort of needed to be put in your place. There was a tiny smirk in my heart at the thought of your expression at first seeing me, escorting you into the hall just outside the movie you were seeing without my company, and possibly other man's. We could talk. What I planned to give you was a stern talking to, and somewhat harshly, but it still civilly give you the peace of my mind. You look up to me as I did, just as an imitated puppy. Yeah, like an imitated puppy with that sad look. You know something you did wrong? It wouldn't be too big of a deal. And of course it wouldn't get physical at all. Still, you needed to understand. I thought that you would learn no better from my necessary correction, and we'd part ways for that evening. There was a brief sense of satisfaction in the idea that came to me like music. The notion of you walking back in, still having that look in your eyes. It was a growing crescendo of that operatic voice. That, however, was not the case. To my surprise, that wasn't the case at all. Indicating the steps down my plan. My being followed into your movies. Trying to explain to the damn ticket attendant that I was only intending to have a talk with someone inside. He threatened to kick me out. It would be provided with a further refusal to buy and hand him a ticket before entering the audience. He had my competence, but not without rolling my eyes at his idiocy. In my reluctance and regret to even more after giving leave the movies, my wallet lost a little weight for the ticket. Nevertheless, it was a stride. Confidence graced my footsteps as I walked into the movie showing to find you. The crowd viewing the movie at the time was relatively smaller, so that made finding you a bit easier. What made you easy to spot, though, was the sound of your laughter, that you probably trashy romantic comedy on the screen. Even though it was collective with your friends, I could pinpoint yours with no shred of difficulty. Approaching your angelic shape from the empty row of seats behind you, my hand gently grasps your funny bone. Even though the touch of my fingers was soft, you gave a sudden jerk and turned around to me. It was sudden even though it made me jump a little. The look you gave was naturally that of surprise, but almost seemed like disgust too. That you wouldn't want make sense though. Why would you feel disgust towards me? After all, we were together at the time. We wouldn't have been if you really looked at me with degree and that disdain, right? There was for some reason a rather interrogative tone in your voice when asking what my person was doing here. Telling you that I needed to talk, you stared at me. Your face wasn't the expression of the illustrated in my thoughts, but what I normally interpret was a silent rage. Again, that would have made sense though. I've done nothing wrong. A couple of seconds of that hateful look in your beautiful eyes. You told your friends that you'd be back within a moment. Your friends finally began pulling away from their obnoxious laughter in the film, and took their glances at me. There wasn't any shock to me that their faces though. They gave me some rather solemn look, and then went back to the movie, shaking their heads. Those girls acted like somehow my presence just ruined their cinematic experience. Whatever, it didn't matter to me. They never appreciated me anyway. I never quite understood what you saw in them, and from my interactions with them, it was obvious that they couldn't be pleased. Well, not by me anyway. Not as if they were worth it though. Frankly, if it were up to me, you would have seen them the way my eyes did. Forgotten them a long time ago. Maybe it was so-called friends who put you up to doing what you did to me in the hall. The look of rage got stronger in your face as I heard in all the new tone of your voice, greatly indicating that constraints in your words were speaking to me quietly, as if to hold you back, yelling, "Who do you think you were?" Anyway, you started exaggerating words that actually hurt, like possessive, controlling, and unbearably clingy. You went on about how calling and texting constantly was purely out of control. Apparently you had no room to breathe, and I didn't get why you'd think that. Sure, the quantity of my calls can be just a few times a day, and the texting were slightly more than responding to them. But it wasn't that much. It wasn't as much as you tried to portray me. Calls from daily were only 3, maybe 4. It's not as if those were big numbers, you know. What really got me through was the last remark you made before storming back to the movie. Not only did you get in my face and say that it was over, but you also made a threat to call the police if I tried to see you without an invitation again, especially if I followed you back in. Why though? Didn't you like seeing me? That would only make sense. After all, we were together then. How would you not enjoy a surprise visit? I know I enjoyed them from you, but perhaps you didn't know well enough to be appreciative. Walking out of the building, it just didn't quite process. What had just happened was still floating just above my skull, even as my hand turned to my ignition of my car. Of course I left immediately after you stomped back into the movie. It wasn't sure what you'd do this, but an encounter with the police was never known to be a fun thing. So I decided to simply comply for the moment. What had just happened didn't quite sink in until the day after. God, I could already feel my heart having to plunge into my stomach. There were black waters surrounded by an empty, dull sky, keeping it down inside. It really did feel like drowning. Going through 459 pictures of us stored on my computer, including the ones when you weren't looking at the camera, it came to me. The realization came to my head, like the burst of brilliant sunlight throughout my bedroom window. There was still a chance. There was always a way. There's always a way to make things change and make things right again. That's the funny thing about love. When someone falls in its depths, they can never let go. They can never entirely let go. At first it seemed like the wiser choice to simply give up, but something like that took much of my emotion, deserved more effort than that. The willpower in me was strong enough, but there was still no glimmer of what to do at that point. I had faith in that it would come to me though. No solutions arrived to me immediately, but it did. Not to worry, dear. I always knew that you had the feeling that leaving was wrong, and maybe you didn't understand just yet. There was still a glimmer of hope. In those times, there were things that seemed hopeless. I'd prove those tides of Primison wrong, although the gorgeous mermaid with open arms in the horizon. But a bit of hope was always there for me. Not knowing what to plague for weeks, however, both was a blessing and a curse at the same time, came along. It was a disease to bring me far more hatred beyond my anticipation. Came 27 days after you made your initial mistake. Now that I think of it, it could have happened before my and the rest of everyone's knowing upon that daily secret pleasure of a routine that took a look at your Facebook page. Even though you instantly deleted me from your friends list after that dreadful night in the theater, that's when I saw it. You changed your status to being in a relationship to somewhat of an unworthy son of a bitch named Steve Bradley. Just seeing you holding that bastard in your tender arms like a new profile picture heated my blood. I could feel it boil in my veins as growing nausea churned in my stomach. It was only natural, but the very nanosecond of seeing that, there was a bulging craving stabbed to the chest and dim in the sleep. A quick jab in the neck, maybe? Perhaps through the heart? Heh, then again, stealing you like that doesn't guarantee of having a heart at still. Still was something to think about, and a bit ironic at that. At least my knife will finally come in handy. And sure, such an action will repulse you at first, but you'll come around to understand. Not too long after that, it came to my knowledge that the same smiling imp that stole your heart didn't live far from me at all. The information provided me was the sources like white pages, internet. In fact, it was roughly a 20-minute drive. According to the maps shown over Google, my GPS found the address without a problem. It's amazing what you can find about people for the internet, though, isn't it? A couple of days of planning were needed for the right place to dispose of certain remains. Once the deed I had in mind would be done, there would be no point in keeping them. That would just be silly now, wouldn't it? It had to be done, though. It was absolutely necessary. It was simply needed. You understand? I know we do. We were meant to be. You were meant for me. Of course you already knew this, and you'd understand why I had to do this. Then again, maybe you don't need to be reminded. The obviousness of it had all been buried in your conscience, like it in mine. Someone like me can get all a little worked up, as you've seen before. But it's okay. You were always compassionate type, so there was a lot of faith in me that you wouldn't think I was crazy. A handful of previous days were spent observing his home. A hunter does need to stalk his prey. A hunter has to know what he can before striking. The pushing his fangs into the prey's throat. It might sound a tad weird, but what else would he learn? How else would he learn not to take what doesn't belong to him? Perhaps the ones that should really be pitied are his parents. They were the ones who didn't raise him that better. It's impressive what good hiding spot assuming his tree across the street can be at night, especially with a good pair of binoculars. I learned at a number of useful things though, which one of being at least one of his parents parked outside. Apparently their garage could only fit one car at a time. It wasn't often that they'd be gone during the night, so it took a number of days to know when to move in. Driving near his house, my car slowly and carefully parked just down the street from where he lived. This was just so in case he knew that my Chevy looked like, he wouldn't know it was me outside. I wasn't sure how he might know, but then again, you can never be too careful. With binoculars, my eyes checked the driveway. There wasn't anyone's car in the driveway, but it was necessary to check through the garage window. Of course, one of them could have parked inside, rushing but tiptoeing nevertheless. I made sure to get a closer look, to clarify if one of the cars is parked in the garage. That part of the house, to my luck, was empty that night. Quietly rushing behind the string of houses he lived, I crawled along the backyards, doing my best not to make any noise. Silly them. Getting in wasn't difficult by means. They never took a simple minute or two of the day just to lock the windows. Slinking my body into the house, though one of the windows that allowed a view of their backyard, I did my absolute best not to make a sound. On every night which it was careful watch made, the knife was carried along in my pocket. Any night could have been night for all I know. It's better to have and not than needed and not to have, right? Wandering about the house briefly, still managing to sneak into his bedroom, my ears perked up on him talking over the phone. I couldn't make out what he was saying intentionally, but not to my dismay. His speech came clearer as it got closer. Putting my ear against the door, The almost primal rage inside my brain boiled to steam of pure hatred. What instantly piqued my perfect anger was hearing him, in a bragging tone, tell how he and you, I can't bear to say, the strain is simply too great. The anger speeding through my bloodstream was far too much to talk it out of doing so, and my hand opened the door slowly for him not to notice. Well, he didn't notice at first. Outside of my expectations, he turned to me with a flabbergasted look. Perhaps the second or third footstep into his bedroom of what gave me away. As you imagine, there was still shall we say, a bit of scrap. No need to worry though. I got away okay, and there was a good few sore spots, and maybe my small limp in my steps. But I got away just fine. Luckily for me, running wasn't too much of a burden, of course. The neighbors hearing him wouldn't have made my situation any better. I'm sure by now you may be feeling, well, a little shocked. You'll start through. You always did. Having found this letter in your bedroom, you've probably figured out by now that someone like me shouldn't have much of an issue finding his way into your room. Perhaps you may be wondering where your cell phone is. Remember how you thought you lost it the other night? Not to worry, that wasn't the case at all. It was a better decision for me to confiscate it, just in case you might be planning on never talking what destined to be mine. You know I don't enjoy deceiving you, but I need to make that quick errand to your bedroom window. Now that I think about it, it was probably even a better decision than I realized. After all, what if in your possible disorientation, you try to call outside party against me, like your friend to do that in the feeder? Maybe I'm just a little smarter than you think. All I want to do is talk, and nothing more. Tonight you'll probably be reading this, since it just slipped into your mailbox today. The person carrying things, who would put in your mailbox at the edge of the afternoon. It wasn't just some young salesman of sorts, wearing a hoodie, it was me. I mean, I didn't want you to know before it was the right time. I promise I just want to talk. I don't plan on being outside of your room for too long though, but I'll wait as long as I need to. After our talk, there are things others to do. Mainly it's disposing the throwaways I have stored in the trunk of my car, and the hole where his heart used to be is probably the beginning to rot by now. With Steve having to be in the trunk for a while, I just need to fix the main problem first, before throwing away those small minor details. Please just open the door and let me in. I just want to talk. You'll understand, right? You need to realize that love like this, especially like this, never dies. You need to understand your destiny bonds need to be fulfilled, and no matter what happens between us, I can never let go.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.